Really good.
Oh, it's really good.
Yeah, I love it.
Oh,
I do.
lovely.
I really
Good,
enjoy it.
good,
So,
good, good.
yeah.
And what will you be doing afterwards?
I'm hoping to work in like social media journalism,
Okay.
sport, I'm a sports journalist.
Oh, lovely.
Hoping to work in rugby or motorsport.
Okay, okay.
Motorsport and that.
That's exciting. And have you been to Silverstone?
Yeah, I have. I went last week for the first time.
I know you've done this twice already. Can we get you just to do a 10 countdown from 10? Are you ready? Yeah, now please.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, lift off.
عشرة تسعة ثمانية سبعة ستة خمسة أربعة ثلاثة اثنين واحد.
Hello?
Brilliant. Oh, well, thank you all for coming. Much appreciated.
Can you hear me? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
I know. We are conscious of it. We are just waiting for our version.
What could that be? Is that on this camera over here? 1, 2, 1. You are getting low levels.
Do you know what I'm hearing? I'm hearing this as well.
1, 2, 1, 2. No, this probably is turning up.
Welcome to NLive Radio's Hustings for the next Northamptonshire's Police, Fire and Crime Commissioner. The hustings will be held in collaboration with the University of Northampton. We're journalism students. The elections will take place on the 2nd of May. What does the commissioner do? They oversee both fire and police forces. They set policing priorities. And what matters most? Burglary or violent crimes, speeding or domestic abuse, tough choices on limited resources. Also budgets. They set a slice of council taxes, the police precept that household payers pay. That matters. And they hire and fire top police officers.
We're delighted to be joined by two of the three candidates. Labour's Danielle Stone, a veteran local councillor, and Lib Dem's Anna Savage-Gunn, a highly experienced former Northampton police officer. But we're missing one of the three candidates, the Conservative Martin Emerson, a former chief bar officer for the county. His campaign team constraints prevent him from actually attending these hustings. This is the third husting that Mr Emerson has failed to attend, and Mr Emerson says he is committed to visible leadership. We at NLive Radio offered Mr Emerson the chance to come into our studio yesterday to do a recording. His team accepted, however he did not show. No explanation, no nothing. Mr Emerson, if you are listening, we have a message for you. This husting is being streamed on YouTube. If you change your mind and you can get here, we have a place for you. Now, can we give a warm welcome to our candidates and our moderator, Kira Stewart.
This is a rebroadcast of this afternoon's stream. So now, on to our first question, and it's from James. James.
Good afternoon. I think it's fair to say that the university has become a magnet for drug dealers. What are you kind of planning to make this campus safer?
Danielle, would you like to start?
Well, I understand you have your own police officers here, don't you? So are you telling me they're not being very effective? I think there's a number of things that are going on. I think a lot of young people these days, I assume you're talking about young people, may not be, because there are older students, aren't there? I think one of our societal problems is that a lot of young people are really alienated. They don't have trust in the future. They see that things are crooked. To be perfectly honest with you, they see a lot of corruption, and I think they are then very vulnerable to gang culture and to being involved in that. So I think we need a multifaceted approach. I think we are living in a society where lots of things are broken and they need fixing. So I'm under no illusion that a commissioner can fix all of that. That's why I'm hoping that I become the Labour commissioner with a Labour government, because I think that combination will help fix the brokenness of what we're facing. It's outrageous that so many young people are so poor, for example. It's outrageous, and we need to fix that.
And I'll pass over to you, Anna.
You do have a department here, that especially for your university, led by a sergeant. And I think that they coordinate with your university. And also I think that before you take on your course here, the university and you could make an agreement that you would try and steer clear of drugs. And if you make that commitment at the start of the course, and know that that's one of the things that if you are caught in either drug dealing or drug receiving, then you know that your course work and you are at risk, and that's a commitment you could make at the start and you would agree to at the start. Also, there's lots of organisations here, sporting organisations, photography clubs, everything, and all of those could actually work together in this with you all. And so if you feel pressure or a pinch point in any area where people are getting approached to either buy or sell drugs, then it doesn't have to be up to the police department here to do it. You could be the voice for that too. You could also set up some sort of anonymous hotline that could go through to the university or whatever, that could report these pinch points, and then they could be taken up by your own police department. That's how I would deal with it, but that's action, not politics, really.
And we're going to move on to our second question now, which is from Fran. So, Fran?
Good afternoon. What's one single practical step you could take to reduce knife crime?
Anna, I'll let you go first with this one.
So The Commissioner has a policy on serious crime that's government-led, and they've decided there are certain things that lead into serious crime, knife crime being one of them. Poverty, mental health, substance abuse, and childhood experiences. All of those that I've described are societal problems that have been exacerbated with a lack of funding into society. And COVID didn't help either in all of that. So Scotland has had a drop in knife crime over the last 20 years. It's halved. So there's been a research study in Scotland by Susan McBee, Professor Susan McBee, looking into why. And they found that if you make an intervention into people's lives, an early intervention before 12, when they make the transition from lower school to secondary school, they become more social, gain more friends, and they actually are drawn to crime less. And crime doesn't usually go down, so it's really important that we notice what's going on there. So early intervention is key, but it is an uphill struggle. I mean, you're right. But in bringing lots of organisations in as well, we can do that. And I know at the moment the Commissioner's Office brings 5 organisations in, and they would be the local authority, policing, fire, etc. But they're not bringing in, strangely enough, education, sports groups, charities. So we're not really bringing in everybody we can to help tackle this. Because I know that, for example, Malcolm Arnold School just yesterday had an input from basketballs, not knives. And that's a group that basketball players that come in and talk to children about sport, how sport can really galvanise their life and pull them away from a life where it could lead to knife crime. So I see the role as doing that. You can. Well done. Yes, so it is approach building everybody in to try and tackle this, not just a few isolated things. Good question.
And Danielle, your response?
We've got to find out where these young people are getting the knives from, and we've got to stop that, haven't we? And it's one of the things that the incoming, let's hope, Labour government is very committed to stop the supply of knives. So I think that is really, really important. And then what we've got to do is tackle why young people feel so alienated and so unhappy. I've worked with young people all my life. I've never known anything like it, the amount of mental ill health amongst young people at the minute. And when I work in schools and with school councils, young people always tell me their biggest concern is they don't feel safe. So that is a big issue that needs to be addressed. I think it's outrageous. And it's not surprising. So when you look at what's happened to young people, they've had their early education disrupted. Nurseries and early years settings find it very difficult to maintain themselves now. We've had Sure Start centres closed. Sure Start centres supported families bringing up very, very young children. And we had youth services closed. And the amount of disinvestment just in this county for young people between the ages of 13 and 21 is £60 million since our youth services were closed. Well, I want to see all of that support for young people put back in. And I don't see it as a privilege, I see it as an entitlement. And how do I know how young people are feeling? It's because I help run an organisation and a project called the Youth Summit. The Youth Summit is a youth leadership scheme. Do feel free to come and film it. It ends in an annual conference which happens in Youth Work Week in November. And at that conference, hugely diverse groups of young people bring forward what their priorities for their lives are. And one of the things they always say is they want their mental health needs properly addressed and they want to feel safe. Those are the two biggest things over the last 5 years that young people have said. So I think there's huge mileage in tackling knife crime at its source, to stop the sale, and to reach a point with young people where they feel empowered to take their lives forward in a much more optimistic way.
Perfect, thank you guys. Now, before we move on to Dante for his question, we're going to play you a clip from one frustrated member of the public.
And it's happened loads of times. Like, we had someone where they nicked their phone on the bar last week. We called the police when it happened. The police said they'll come 3 days later, which is pointless. We said to them, like, the blokes just left the building. I went next door to the Wing and Pen, and they were like, they've just come in here. So if they were actually active, they could have done something to think about it.
So that was from a business owner in Northampton. So, Dante, over to you for your question.
Yes, good afternoon. I want to ask, how can you persuade people if there's any point reporting shoplifting, petty theft and burglary to the police?
Anna, would you like to say that?
Well, every burglary, as far as I'm concerned, should be visited. And I know in some cases that's not, they don't. And shoplifting, as far as I'm concerned, if we had enough police officers, we should be going to every shoplifting case. I know there's a threshold of £200, I think, where they're actually prosecuted. But that's a national government limit. If it was up to me, there wouldn't be a limit. But we need more officers to be available to go to those sorts of crimes. And that's why I want to look at the police, fire and crime commissioner's £7 million budget and try and find some savings, because there's a lot of vagary in the budget. And everybody I've spoken to on the doorstep has said to me, we need more police on the streets or available. And so if every 1 million of that 7 that we're spending elsewhere is 44 officers not on your streets. So that money ought to be really working for us. And if it's not, believe you me, it will be back on the streets and you'll get your burglary visited and your crimes visited.
I'm not just a Labour Party candidate, I'm a Cooperative Party candidate as well. So I have been recently involved in a big national campaign to stop retail crime, actually. And part of that campaign is calling for a very particular offence, which is about prosecuting shoplifters and keeping retail workers safe. Because it's not just theft that is the problem, it's the abuse and the assault on retail staff that is happening as well. And it is completely outrageous. And my view is that that piece of legislation is really, really important. And the Labour government, if it comes in, has agreed to make that a particular offence. In terms of what goes on in our neighbourhoods, I live in the middle of Northampton. I know that people see crime happening in front of them on a daily basis. How on earth has that happened? That never used to happen. This is something that's grown and developed over the last 14 years, and it's got particularly bad in the last 3. We need visible policing. So there's a police hub on Wellingborough Road. You wouldn't know, would you? Because it's closed. There are closed police hubs all over the county. And what we need to do is open them so that we've got very local police officers available and PCSOs, so they don't all have to be warranted officers. But we need immediate responses to things. But we also need what we used to have, actually, which is a networking of people, so neighbourhood wardens, PCSOs, warranted officers, working together with their local communities to stop crime happening. And that's what I want to see. I want to see a reduction in crime. And I think working in that multi-agency way, we could do it.
Can I follow up with that question as to why a response time to burglary is so slow here in Northampton compared to just 15 minutes in our neighbouring Bedfordshire? Danielle, if you'd like to.
It's a question you need to ask the police, really. The answer I've had to that question is that there was a decision made in Northamptonshire a while ago to divert resources from burglaries to cybercrime. Now, I thought that was absolutely foolish. Cybercrime is indeed a huge and serious issue, but it's not either or, is it? Cybercrime and local burglaries affect everybody, and we need proper resourcing of both those things. So I think it was a mistaken policy. And we've seen the result of it, and the result of it is that people don't feel safe. How many times do you see on social media people showing photographs they've taken on their door bell things, and there's people creeping up to their front door or in their drives, trying their vehicles. It's absolutely outrageous. And again, you know, we need visible policing to stop that, don't we? Response times. We used to have quite good response times in this county, and now they've gone down and they're really, really low. So even for very serious crimes, you know, we get very, very low response times, and it isn't good enough. We have to refocus things.
I'm suspecting that because a burglary has occurred sometime overnight and the offender's not there, that they're deciding that they need to be looked at during that day. So it's not seen as an urgent 999 call. The fundamental problem is you don't have enough police officers. We're doing what you would call fire brigade policing, so you're going from one emergency to another, to another, to another. And there's very little gap in the middle to do any proactive policing, let alone go to visit burglaries that have occurred hours before. I would want to try and set up and organise a unit that would go to burglaries, because you may think that, I noticed in the email that you were sent, it was described as a lesser crime. I'd argue that burglary is one of the most fundamental crimes that occurs that impacts people the worst, because it is within your home and people feel safe or should feel safe in their home. So when that happens, it is horrifying to the victims that it occurs to, and we need to be responsible for that and make sure that we actually visit those burglaries. They may have happened 5 hours, 10 hours earlier, but it is important because the impact on the victim is vast.
Thank you both.
Could I just say one other thing? There is also this issue where each crime is seen as an incident on its own, and what we need to get better at is looking at the picture, you know, the pattern of what is happening, which is why calling in everything is really, really important, so people understand the pattern of it, isn't it? And then you can have a response to the pattern as well as to the incident.
Thank you both. This is just a reminder that you are listening to N Live Hustings from the Northamptonshire Police, Fire and Crime Commissioner at the University of Northampton. We are joined by Labour's candidate Danielle Stone and the Liberal Democrats Anna Savage-Gunn. The Conservative candidate Martin Emerson was unable to join us. You will find further details about Martin and all the other candidates on the N Live website. Now question 4 comes from Jess. Jess, over to you.
Good afternoon, both of you. So we've heard a lot about policing so far, but obviously you will also be in charge of Northamptonshire's fire department. ITV has reported across the UK that there's a culture of racism and sexism within the fire department, and our department in particular has been slated for being a difficult place to work, for being poorly managed. How can you make the fire department a better place to work?
Danielle?
Very good question. We need stability at the top, I think. I think the culture of organisations is a leadership issue. I think we're really, really unfortunate here that we've had 4 fire chiefs in a year. I don't think that's at all helpful. I think we need to make sure that we have a very diversified workforce. I work with young people, refugee young people in actual fact, and I'm really, really seriously trying to get them to consider a career. It's a brilliant career actually in firefighting, but we need to diversify the workforce. I think there are huge training issues around equalities that need to happen. I think there's systemic racism in most public bodies, to be honest with you. I don't think it's just the fire service, and I think they all need addressing. Firstly by training, but then by enforcement, you know, where things go wrong, that needs to be taken really seriously and acted on. I think it comes from the top though. We need really, really good leadership.
And Anna, in response to the question?
Yes, it's nationally in the fire service. There's, I mean, just I watched, it was on the news yesterday as well, some WhatsApp messages from fire service officers. the way you can do it is set your stall out. I mean, for start off, having a female commissioner would be a good start. I don't want to out myself, but having a lesbian female commissioner, well, I just have, haven't I? Having a lesbian female commissioner would certainly start that off. And encouraging women and people of diversity to join the fire brigade and supporting them in that, and training and setting out a structure where we can stop being organisations that are so sort of seen as macho. That would start. I mean, back in the 80s, I was the supervisor of the tactical firearms team, the first female, and that was quite edgy back then. I found that once the officers knew that you could do your job and respected you, it was fine with support, and I had that support. So I would offer support to all of the fire officers and police officers that are from diverse backgrounds personally.
Thank you both. We've got another question for you. So now we go to Olivia. Olivia?
Yeah, good afternoon. So what's the point in the police catching more criminals if the courts are on their knees and prisons are overflowing?
Anna, I'm going to say to you first.
Yeah, it's bad what's happening. Barristers are paid less than barristers at the moment, and some of the backlogs in some of the high crime cases, the profile cases, for example, rape, can be 5 years. And the police commissioner runs a service called Voice, which is victim support. And victim support should be from the short time of the offence to when it appears in court, which you'd think would be 6 months maybe. No, it's not. And that's putting a lot of resource, pressure on police officers to try and keep people, victims, able to go to court. So pressure on government to try and make court so quicker. They've underfunded a lot of things, public services, NHS. They've also underfunded the court system. So yes, you're right. And where does that hit? It backs up into the police service, because it's like the NHS. Where does no beds and underfunding of hospitals? It ends up with being outside the front door in an ambulance. And the same with policing. It ends up with us as police services having to deal with the fact that it takes long for stuff to go to court. A lot of people don't see that when they offend and the consequence, if there's that big a gap between the offence and the consequence, it then in their minds they can't relate it one to the other, and they carry on prolifically offending in between, because they think, well, what's the point? I'm not going to court for ages, so, and when I do get to court, they'll just take into consideration this bit. So actually it's encouraging crime.
And Danielle, how would you respond to the question from Olivia?
I think the criminal justice system is broken. In Northamptonshire, we used to have 6 magistrates' courts. Now we've got 2, so no wonder there are huge backlogs. It's absolutely outrageous. Now, I think we need, forgive me for saying so, but we need a Labour government to come in and rectify all of that. That's not in the Commissioner's gift to do. What is in the gift of the Commissioner is prevention. So I want to see a reduction in crime, and I think there's lots and lots of things we can do in partnership with lots of other organisations to stop people going into crime. What I also want to see when people do commit crimes, an intervention at a very early stage, so that we can persuade people out of crime before they get into court. And I'm very, very persuaded by the experience of other areas having problem-solving courts. Now I think a lot of policing is about problem-solving, and I really, really like that approach. So problem-solving courts have been set up to stop criminalising women who are poor, who are stealing or selling their bodies or doing whatever they are doing to help maintain their families. It's about going on a journey with those women to keep them out of the criminal justice system, because it's outrageous that a lot of women with children are in prison for very, relatively small crimes. But the same kind of idea is being applied in some areas to young people. So when they start going off the rails, the thing isn't, oh, this is a bad person. It's about what have we done in our society to fail this young person? And what do we need to help support them so that they can live a good life? So I think we need a prevention policy to stop crime happening. We need an intervention policy to help people get out the hole that they've dug for themselves. And we only should be using enforcement when those two things have failed.
Perfect, thank you both. We're going to go over to Liam now for his question. Liam?
Yes, good afternoon. So just quickly, I think Adrian has a question for you after I've asked mine. But candidates for your job can't stand if they have a criminal conviction. Do you think councillors and MPs should be barred from standing if they've had a criminal conviction in the past?
Anna, do you want to go first for this one?
Yes. 4 weeks ago, well, on the 21st of March, I addressed the West Northampton Council and I asked, demanded basically that every councillor ought to have a DBS check, which is a basically criminal background check. I work part-time in my mum's care home, and sometimes I work in the kitchens wherever they need it. To peel potatoes and have no interaction with anybody in the care home, I have to have a DBS check. Yet I find it staggering that my councillor, and remember 55% of your council taxes go to women's services, child services, etc. So they make it, so more than half of their work is with vulnerable people. They don't have to even have a background check, let alone a criminal records check. And bearing in mind the Angiolina inquiry, if you recall, PC Wayne Cousins in the Met, murdered, and the preliminary findings of that inquiry, it's really unusual that they actually released it so early, was that they said that abuse hides in plain sight, and there was chances where he could have been found out. Remember, he went through a McDonald's drive-through in his car and flashed himself, car number plate right there. Nothing was done, even though they knew who he was. So I see that when that sort of stuff hides in plain sight, we need to shine a light on it. And part of doing a DBS check for all people in offices of responsibility is shining a light. And it might be uncomfortable. There might be some councillors, some MPs that will have to step down. But I truly believe that they should not be in that job if they have a criminal conviction or if they can't pass a DBS check. Because you and I probably have to if you want to work in my mum's care home.
And Danielle, how would you respond to the question?
The Labour group have been calling for DBS checks for councillors for years and years and years, and it's perfectly shocking that we don't have that as a matter of course. Councillors work with and support lots and lots of very, very vulnerable people, and of course there should be DBS checks. But I'll just put one little caveat on that. I think it's okay to be rehabilitated. So if you've got a criminal conviction from when you're 18 and you want to become a local politician at 25, which I hope some of you may do, then it depends on what that conviction was for and how you can demonstrate that rehabilitation. So I'm not in favour of things that you've done in the past, you know, dogging you forever and a day and ruining your life. I think there is always room for rehabilitation. But I think it's completely outrageous that we don't expect public figures to have DBS checks. Of course they should.
Thank you. Adrian, you've got a question.
I've got two quick ones, if I may. One is, it's fantastic to see a female student directing a debate with two female candidates. Is there anything special you bring as a woman to this role? And secondly, day one, what's the first big job you're going to get on with?
Danielle, I'll let you go first for this one.
Well, I always think there's something very special about being a woman, to be perfectly honest with you. I think often we're forced to be multitaskers, aren't we? And we're forced to work in partnership with lots of other people, because otherwise we wouldn't survive. So I think those are, you know, that ability to collaborate and cooperate is a really important strength that most women I know bring into the arena with them. On day one, I'm so looking forward to this. I am so looking forward to this. I'm going to do two things. One is I'm going to interrogate the budget, and I'm going to find out where the gaps are, where the weaknesses are, and what money I can claw back out of the budget for frontline services, both in the police and in the fire service, because they've been underinvested for such a long time. The second thing I'm going to do is ask the staff there to coordinate a meeting for me with all the chief executive officers of all the local authorities, the health service, whosoever, so that we can start a conversation about how we can collaborate to bring down the rate of crime and to make life better, particularly for our young people, but for our families. Because I think by working collaboratively across the county, we can affect an awful lot more than if we're working separately and in our little silos. And we can add value to each other's work. So there isn't enough money. Our police force and our fire service has been massively underfunded. And that is in spite of the fact we've had 7 Conservative MPs, most of whom have been in government. I don't understand why they haven't looked after. I really don't understand how they haven't looked after the county better than they have. But I think those are the two things that I would do first.
And Anna, how would you respond to the two questions?
As a woman, I think I've been a pioneer back in the 80s, and I think we need to pioneer the commissioner job, because there's still a lot of work to be done, clearly. You've seen it in the news, in the fire service and the police service, to diversify and bring diversity to the police service and fire service, because it is still the last bastion of male exclusivity at the moment. And so to be led by a woman would really send a message. But not just to be led by a woman, be led by somebody that has integrity and somebody that is not led by politics. I've purposely not, it costs £5,000 to enter to be a commissioner. I've purposely paid that myself, because I don't think a commissioner ought to be beholden to any party or any person financially. And if somebody gives you money to stand, then you can be. So I want to be seen as integrity. I will not show fear or favour to anybody, and that's how it should be. So I would start by leading with integrity and lead by example, and appointing a police chief and fire officers that this county can be proud of, and that's at the start. Then after that, yes, look at the budget then and see where we can put money back to where it should be, because there's been a lack of accounting, it seems to me, or measuring of our performance in terms of financial performance there. So yeah, but lead by example and keep politics out of policing and fire, because who isn't sick of politics? I know I am.
Thank you both. Odiel's got a question for you. So Odiel, what would you like to ask?
So my question to you both is, why do you think we should trust the police?
Anna, would you like to go first?
Because this is a country where you police by consent. So the police are here, and fire, I guess, to be here to support and help the community thrive. And you need to trust them, because that's what keeps the community safe. And I would do my best to make that fire service and police service the best fire and police service we can, because back in the 90s, I know we were, because they used to send us police officers from Europe all over to come and look and see how we did it. So yes, I would make sure that you can trust us, and we will act with integrity. So yes, we will lead by consent.
Danielle, how would you respond?
Well, trust in the police is broken, isn't it? For all the reasons that we've been talking about, lack of responsiveness, lack of convictions, all of those kind of things. So clearly there's a huge issue. I grew up in a very poor working class family, and the whole environment that I was in was anti-police, I have to say. And the first time I realised how important the police were and that they have to be my friends was when my fourth child lost himself. I didn't lose him, it was his father. Lost himself in Goulburn Road Market, which is very scary. And I had to call the police, and the police found him and brought him home, and it was all fine. And it was then I thought, oh, of course, they're there to look after me and my children. That's absolutely the way it should be. So what I think needs to happen is we need to bring policing closer to the communities. I think the police need to be much more involved in our communities. They need to understand the diversity within our communities and not just see it as something they can read about on paper. They need to get into the communities, mix with the communities, understand the communities, and be a part of the communities. And I think that can be done very easily, in actual fact. So I think the police and the community shouldn't be strangers to each other. They need to build relationships with each other. And that will change the nature of the policing, I think. That will change the nature of the policing, and hopefully will stop all the incidental discrimination that goes on. So, for example, with stop and search, I've just had a briefing on that which said black young people were overrepresented in the figures for stop and search, yet 76% of those cases were found not to have anything on them. There was no reason for the stopping and the searching. We need to stop things like that happening, don't we?
Thank you. We have another question from our audience. So, Andy, what would you like to ask?
Yes. Anna, you've said that you would like to see this role that you're actually going for to be abolished, I believe. Why is that? Do you think it should not be a political role, or would you like to see the old police authorities brought back? And obviously that is for both of you. Where do you stand on that?
Well, I don't think there ought to be politics in policing or fire, and the old police authority it was made up of councillors who were already paid, and it was a cross-party councillors and some independent members of the public and magistrates. And they oversaw that the police service was effective and efficient, and the fire authority had something similar. And I think that was better value for money. This was set up by the Conservative Party. I don't quite know why, but having said that, it's here, and other statutory responsibilities have been given to the role. For example, victim support services, juvenile intervention and complaints, and being given funding for that. So you can't really take it away now because you've got those responsibilities, but at least pick somebody that's got some experience and expertise and knowledge to deal with it, and not necessarily a politician.
Danielle, do you have any response to that question?
The commissioner role was set up by the Conservative government. This term, this election will see 3 terms of commissioners in place across the country. I really think it's time for that to be reviewed. So there has been a national call for a royal commission to examine how policing should happen in this country and what the governance arrangements for that be. And I'd be absolutely in favour of that. In fact, I look forward to it, and it'll be one of the things I call for if and when I'm elected. I think it's a really important thing to do. I think in the meantime,